everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Roundtable. This episode, I really believe, is going to be value to you and to your team. We're going to be talking with David Miller, who is the Vice President of Coaching at the Slingshot Group, who has just wrote a new book that is available today. You need to go out and get it. It's called Improv Leadership, and we're going to be diving into the book. We're going to be talking about how it would help you and you leading your team. And so I'm excited. David, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I appreciate it, Ryan. It's good to be with you.
So David, why don't we take a step back and why don't you just tell us a little bit about your ministry journey, kind of how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, no, happy to. Man, I took a pretty roundabout path. If I'm honest, I was kind of that punk kid in youth ministry that most youth pastors, you should want, but you don't want, like just kind of, messing around a lot. And I ended
kid
up,
that is annoying during the time, but you kind of hope there's future for.
That's exactly it. We've all had them, and I was one of them. Give us a break, we'll come around. And so that was totally me. And man, I started in music. So for me, I toured with a band for about 5 years, and was just noticing, when we go into these venues, these churches, that man, there's something about like what's happening in leadership, and I would kind of almost study each of the pastors that we would go and sit with, and lead worship for. From there, I got a scholarship to go to college, and man, like I said, a youth pastor. I think I can say this with your crowd here. A youth pastor gave a crap about me, and that made me want to do that for other students. That was my journey, man. That was what made me want to do it. Once I was in, I was a youth pastor for a 5-campus, youth ministry in Orlando, Florida, and loved that. Launched our own camps, did a bunch of really fun stuff, things that are still going on today, which is like 12 or 13 years later. Came down to Long Beach. I'm from Southern California, and man, youth ministry was, quite honestly, it was the goal. I mean, it wasn't, everyone talks about stepping stones and whatnot. Like, man, I just love students and wanted to really invest there. And along the way, I just had these other opportunities that came up, and opportunities that allowed me to kind of lean in a little bit heavier. The guys from Slingshot Group, Monty Kelso and Stan Endicott, they were going to launch a student ministry search team. And I just, they said, hey, what do you think about coming and be a part of the team? And so I helped launch that team almost nine and a half years ago now. Started with just me, and started bringing on, just people that I, really what's fun when you're building your own team is you get to watch and say, who do I want to do life with? Who do I enjoy, really like leaning into, and who do I want to learn from, and inviting those people onto the team with you. And actually, I mean, that was how you and I met, is, talking about residencies and some of the work you were doing. And then, I was just like, gosh, this guy, I'd love to bring him and work with this guy. So, did that. We've placed, 350 youth pastors, just in the like 6 years that we were tracking it. And it was amazing. It was an amazing season. Since then, I was asked if I would take over the coaching division at Slingshot Group, and we launched our own coaching strategy and built a team. We've got 21 coaches that I get to really do life with, and and lead on that team. And it's really, really cool, man. So that's the journey in a nutshell.
I love it. So you recently wrote the book. You and Stan wrote this together. So, it's Improv Leadership, How to Lead Well in Every Moment. And I love it because, the idea of leading well in every moment, as opposed to just these prescribed moments, but it's in every moment, every context. So take us to the beginning there. What was the catalyst? What was kind of that beginning moment of saying, I think we got a book here?
Yeah, man, it caught us off guard, if I'm honest. The idea of improv leadership is, almost 5 years old now. And it started as our internal coaching strategy. And so, when we came in, when I came in as that lead person for coaching, I was like, well, why would someone want a slingshot coach versus, whatever other coach is out there? And we started to really, that question, we started to kind of dig down into what is our secret sauce, what makes us unique, why do we do what we do? And a big piece of it was the founder of our organization, Stan Endicott. has this ability to, we say he can get to the heart of a person faster than anyone, we've ever met. And that ability has kind of made him a guru. He as he coaches people, there are people that are more strategic than he is, but they're not able to actually get to who that person is at their core. And Stan is able to kind of get in there and really stretch who they are. And so we wanted to make that a transferable idea. How do you take these things that he does and that our coaches are doing so naturally and kind of through osmosis? How do we make those into things that someone could learn? And so we started training our team. We launched an online training, like executive pastors and ministry leaders would say, well, I lead 5 staff members or 20 staff members or, whatever the number is, how about you teach me how to coach my staff? And so we started to teach that. So we brought a few thousand people, through these live trainings that we were doing. The online training, another couple thousand have gone through that. And we had someone come through and they said, hey, well, this is a book. Like, you guys should write a book about these competencies, these 5 competencies of improv leadership. And honestly, at first we kind of rejected that notion. It was like, no, man, this is a training. This is this is a little bit of a system. This is not a book. And they kind of convinced us, hey, why don't you put together a chapter, put together what an outline could look like, and let's see if any of these publishers think it's a book, and so we did, and partnered with some great people, and it's in your hand now. I mean, Zondervan picked it up, and gosh, even now when I read through it, I got my book, a little bit ago, and even when I read through it, I'm like, man, it's like, where was this when I was that youth pastor? Where was this when I was, when I had, 40 volunteers, and so it's been really, really fun, man. It's been fun to dig in, but that's the origin of the book. It was never meant to be one.
That's great. Just a passion and
Yeah.
just kind of fumbled into it. And so the title, Improv Leadership, right? So when I was in high school, even in college, I did improv theater, and
Nice.
It basically meant, we had no script. We just kind of jumped on stage blind, and we all just kind of wrote this story as we went through, and we
Sure.
had some basic parameters, but we kind of bounced off each other to create a scene, to create a story. So how does that, that's kind of my context of the word improv, right? And so how does that play into this idea of improv and leadership? How's that kind of translate?
Yeah, I love that you've done improv, so you get it more than so many. I mean, a lot of times when people think of the word improv, they think that it means making things up as you go, and that's actually just not factual. If you've done improv, or if you're a musician, and you maybe have improv like a song with friends or with your band, you know that only the best, only the most proficient can truly improv something. You have to understand your craft so much that you can draw on it at any moment. And so we've been watching, man. We've been watching. Stan comes from the music world. I've got some music background. We've been watching this happen, this phenomenon happen. But with leaders, we've noticed that when we don't understand what we're doing or what we're supposed to be doing, we kind of sit back and watch. We watch what other leaders. We not only watch, but like in a lot of cases, we criticize. We become critics, and we substitute criticism for leadership far too often. And what we want to figure out is, how can you, no matter what's going on around you, because we don't have, we're not working with machines, right? We're working with people. It's messy, and it's not going to go the way that we want it to go. And all of the plans. I mean, think about the season that we're in right now with COVID, with all of the things that are going on in our country, with people protesting, and I mean, all these things. The script has been thrown out. And in so many ways, that's beautiful. Like, there are things within the church that COVID, for those that can really improv, it's going to change, and it's going to mark the church moving forward in beautiful and great ways. There are things going on with this conversation around race that is going to change things for the better for generations to come. And I wouldn't want it any other way than the way that it's happening right now. I mean, I see people that are mourning the things that are happening. I'm not. I'm watching what's happening, hopeful and expectant as far as the things that are going on, because there are going to be leaders who have honed their craft in such a way that they're going to be able to lead out of this in a way that brings new hope, that's going to bring new tactics, that's going to add to the conversation. I'm also watching, though, and I'm seeing those leaders who are not prepared for what's happening right now, because they can't meet in their building, because they can't have staff meetings, live and in person. They are at a loss because of the conversation happening around race that makes people feel uncomfortable. They are at a loss. And the thing is, man, like, there's so much here for someone that truly is able to improv within this context. And now, again, this is an extreme example, this season is, but even when you're just in your normal routine, volunteers aren't going to show up that you thought were going to. Someone's supposed to speak but they get sick. Something's going to happen with your supervisor, and you're going to have to pivot the way that you ask for more budget. All of the stuff that happens in a leader's life really has to be able to be maneuvered and understood. And so what we did, because the concept itself can go a lot of different ways, what we went ahead and did is we found 5 core competencies that if you as a leader could really hone in on these 5, you would be able to draw on them and lead well in any moment. And that's really what the whole concept is about.
Yeah, I've heard people say that what's really hard about this season right now is that leaders are used to being the ones that have already experienced it, or they've already researched it. They've already talked to everybody and kind of figured out a plan. And then they're kind of leading their team through it as well. But right now, everyone's getting the same information at the same time, and no one's really led through this. And so, it kind of paralyzes people. Right. But what you're saying is that, when you've got kind of that improv mentality of, hey, we don't know exactly this season, but we can draw on some of these moments, these competencies that you're talking about to draw out some stories and things like that. And so I want to talk about this. I recently read a survey that asked pastors about their number one challenge as a pastor in the church. And it said this, that 45% dealt with volunteers and change. That 45% of all their issues dealt with volunteers and change. And so let me break it down here. It says 24% said that recruiting volunteers is their biggest challenge. And number 3 was 19% was developing leaders. And on page 47 in the book, you tell this story from your own personal experience. And I just want to kind of read it. And then I'd love for you to kind of unpack it and kind of give us a little bit more a real time, maybe, if you can. And give us a little bit more than in the book. Whenever I talk to people, there's always a little bit more than what's in the book, right? So I want to get a little bit more from here. So it says that when David, was in Next Gen ministry, I had a classic problem, getting volunteers to serve in the student ministry. I tried everything I knew to fix the solution, but nothing seemed to work. The turning point came when I stopped viewing the situation solely as a problem to fix and started viewing it as people to love. I realized that I had been inviting people to a task, but I was not inviting them into the students' stories or into my story. I did not ask them about their stories and weaving them into our story. But after I started engaging relationally and potential volunteers and describing the opportunities in relational terms, I did not need to look for volunteers anymore. And this is it. Volunteers came to me. Okay. So this is like the dream, right? This is the dream. We work with a lot of leaders around the nation, right? And everyone talks about, oh man, I need more volunteers. And it's almost a joke, right? Like, it's almost this joke of like, well, of course we need more volunteers. It's like, it's kind of this joke. And so the fact that you just wrote that, that a principle, a competency in this book can help eliminate what, the biggest issue that this survey says, and we all have been in there, youth ministry, kids ministry, outreach, whatever ministry you're leading, we've all been there where we need more volunteers. So give us a little bit more than maybe you wrote in the book.
Yeah. Well, and so the competency that you're talking about is this idea of what we call story mining. And it's getting below the layers of a person's story. And a lot of times like people stop there with the definition. So the definition continues in our world. It's getting below the layers of a person's story and allowing it to shape the way you lead them. Someone's story, like people want to be known. They want to be understood. Nobody, let's talk about your volunteers. Let's talk about your paid staff. Nobody grew up dreaming about their dream job being a cog in the machine of someone else's ministry, right? None of your volunteers want to come and just to check the list of being a volunteer. That might get them in the door initially for some of them, but that's not what's going to keep them, and it's not what's going to make them want to tell people about what they're experiencing. And so what if, one, there's nuances here in the story. One, if you can actually uncover and tell the story of your ministry well. So an example, I like to ask, the big ask when I'm, bringing in a volunteer, especially for student ministry, was this. Hey, remember when you were in high school and there was an adult that just like spent time with you? Like wasn't that amazing? And here's the choose your own adventure part. If they say yes, then it's what would it look like if you were that for someone else? If they say no, you're like, man, I bet you that was really hard. What if you were that for someone else?
Mm.
And when you touch someone's story, I told them my story, I'm talking about the story of our ministry, and I'm bringing their story into it. It engages their imagination and as to what could be, and it moves them from the real concept of life change versus simply I show up to make sure no one's making out in the corner during the sermon, right? Like it shifts what everyone's thinking about in youth ministry in that moment. The other side of it is that once I have them in as a volunteer, I looked at my volunteers as my key recruiters. And so I needed them to know that I cared about their story. I would understand and mark down important dates in their family's life. I would reach out to them on not only on their birthday but their kid's birthday. I knew their kids' names. That kind of stuff is important in helping someone to really realize this person, this leader's not only talking to me because I serve a purpose in their ministry, they're talking to me because they actually give a rip, because my story matters in the context of this ministry. And so when that starts happening, all of a sudden volunteers are hanging out with their friends. They're going on a men's or women's retreat. They're they're in their small group, and they're talking about this ministry that they get to be a part of through the lens of not just their duty, but they know the stories of students, and we know their story, and we're celebrating together. And all of a sudden I started getting volunteers that would just come to me and say, how do I get to be a part of this? What does it look like for me to be in this ministry? Because again, it was the volunteers were part of the ministry. They weren't just the cog in the machine. I was ministering to them through leadership. And I think that kind of stuff, man, if more of us understood that every person who you come in contact with wants to be known, that every person you come in contact with wants to be a part of something bigger, I think recruiting will start to shift in your ministry to where you're no longer just pleading and begging with someone, would you please at least consider being a driver? Would you please, just do something, show up for something? I mean, the amount of times that I'm talking to, people in next gen ministry, and they're like, yeah, I just feel like the time commitment's too big. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, sure. For some people it is. For other people, they're just not actually engaged. And so they don't want to spend those extra hours. I remember in our ministry, man, I was like, are you sure you want to be here both for Sunday and for Wednesday and go to camp and do this and do this and do this? Like, are you sure? Because I actually, one, because it shocked me at first because that's not what I had experienced in the beginning. But two, it actually moved me into a place that I wanted to care for them rather than to bleed them dry and take every ounce of energy they have until they burn out and they no longer want to be a part of it. I'm trying to protect them as I get to know their story and move into who they are.
Yeah. And kind of like what you said, they don't want to miss out on being a part of that student's life,
right.
because not only do you know your volunteer story, but the volunteers know the kid's story
Right.
or the student's story.
Yeah, we pass that along to them. We show them how important it is by the way we treat them and train them. And now they're doing that for others. So they can't imagine not going to that kid's graduation, right? They can't imagine, I mean, that terrible 7th grade recital. They can't imagine not going to that, right? Because
Come on, man. Everybody loves the recital.
yeah, no, they're miserable. But they can't imagine it because it wasn't about the recital. It wasn't about being entertained. It was simply about this matters in this student's story, and I want to be a part of it. And I'm telling you, man, if you understand now as leaders, now here's what I've found, okay? I've found that most people, when they read that part or when I talk about the idea of story mining, I've never had any leader say, nah, stories don't matter. I've never had that happen. I always have people say, yeah, no, totally. That makes total sense. Like that's a great, competency for people to learn or, whatever.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't actually do it. I've read all these books in leadership, man, that talk about how they're inspirational. They talk about how important something is, but they don't actually give me any, tools, like actual, ways forward to get better at it. And so what we're trying to do in each of these chapters, each of these competencies, we're trying to say story mining. So here's the inspiration. You should know people's stories. They matter. They will change the way you lead. They will change the way that your people experience you. And if you are not proficient at this, let us help you move forward. And so we challenge people in that, right before I think you talk about that passage on page 47, we challenge people when we say, hey, like, what if you were really good at asking questions? In fact, what if you were so good at asking questions that you could give yourself the moniker, I am a professional question asker? What if you saw your job as a leader, whatever, youth ministry, lead pastor, executive, children, whatever it is, I see it as my job to be a professional question asker. Well, man, that ups the bar. So in this chapter, we give, a few pages of questions. In the training that we do, we actually give 7. It's like 150 questions for people, because we ask them become a connoisseur of questions so you can know someone's story. We talk about all these different things that will, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 2 when it comes to asking good questions. What if we helped you with these tools and with this inspiration to help you to get to become a 7? And then in time you practice and you become a 9. You know what I mean? Like, and you really can hone that skill so that wherever you find yourself, whether it's at a random table at someone's wedding, or it's, because we always get put at the pastor's table, right? So whether at that table at someone's wedding, or whether it's a meeting that you're leading, you are ready to draw on, to improv, and to ask great questions in that moment.
Yeah, I think it was you that said when I was talking to you when we were first kind of, I don't know, a few years ago, kind of unpacking this, you talked about like improv is being so prepared that you can just be fully in the moment without having like this script. Like a musician, they've practiced so much. They know so many chords. They know so many progressions.
Right.
And the muscle memory that they can just begin to feed off of what else is going around them. I love that. So, okay. We got a few minutes left here, David. And so I'd love to jump into some of these competencies. There's 5 of them. And I've been using them as a coach. I've been using them just like you said, even at just gatherings, things like that. I mean, it just really has helped me to be significantly more present. And I know that's like a buzzword, that's a trendy word. But I really feel like that's a big part of what improv leadership does, is it allows you to be present because you're so prepared. You're not thinking in the back of your head of like, okay, what's the script? What's the agenda? Just kind of, I'm just there. Yep. So let's dive into one of my favorites is precision praise.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about kids being bullied. We talk a lot about just kind of a hostile environment that people aren't encouraged, people, whatever. So precision praise to me personally just kind of strikes a chord with me. Maybe it's because I grew up being picked on. Back in the day, we call it being picked on or whatever, but now it's got a cool name, bullied. But, so just kind of maybe a little bit precision praise. It's more than just, hey, bud, good game. It's more than that. And so just give us just a little bit into that.
Yeah. Well, so here's the definition that we have for it. So it's uh, carefully crafting praise to inspire and course correct your team. The reality is people are motivated by praise. Like, we get this endorphin rush when someone sees something in us and they call it out of us. We have this ability to be able to say, whoa, like, you see this in me, and
Mm.
even you want it more. I tell a story in the book, again, about volunteers. And in the ministry one of the ministries that I was a part of, we would have meals. So we had 200 something students coming every.
Ministry is always good with a
it's
meal. Let's
it's
be
so much
honest.
better. It's so much better. And so we had this thing where we would have meals. 200 something students would come, get a meal for $2 or something, and free if they couldn't afford it. And man, it was so fun. What was maddening was that I have these volunteers who just really loved each other, and they wanted to hang out with each other, and and so the volunteers, I would catch them like eating at tables as volunteers, and they weren't spending time with the students, who we had really come to spend the time with. And so I'd go up to them and I'd say, hey, if it was you, hey, Ryan, man, I'm so excited you're here. Hey, would you just do me a favor and spend some time with students during this meal, so that you can really build relationship and understand a little bit more. And right away, you'd be like, totally, David. Oh man, I'm on it. Nobody ever pushed back. Everyone knew that was what they were supposed to be doing. But week after week after week, I was having to do that same thing, remind them why this
Mm.
was important. Things started to shift when I started to say, like at the end, when we'd have like a wrap up meeting, or in the emails that I would send, I would choose someone. So now I'll use you again. I would say in like an email, hey, I just want to give a really big shout out to Ryan. Ryan is doing an incredible job, um, eating eating his meal on Wednesday nights with students. Well, then all of a sudden I started watching as the other volunteers started eating with students, because what I was doing is I was showing them the kind of culture. I was enculturating
Mm.
them into what we were all about. And instead of enculturating them by making them feel bad, or by correction over and over and over again, I enculturated them through praise. So one of the tools that we use in the book is we have what we call a praise aiming matrix, which is super nerdy. You know what I mean? It's very coaching style stuff. But I would literally say, what is like the purpose of my praise? So what am I trying to accomplish? And really, who is the audience? Is it an individual? Is that person not even in the room, and so actually everyone else is the audience? What are we going to do about that? And when you start to have the ability to aim your praise, to use it and to become so proficient, to understand your audience, to understand really what motivates. So you've uncovered their story a little bit. So you now start to understand what motivates that person. You can use praise to move your ministry forward, to move that individual forward. You said this kind of at the beginning when you were talking about it for a moment. I was sitting in myself, Stan Endicott, and actually a really good friend, Will Mancini. The three of us were really crafting a lot of these tools together. And I remember sitting, with the two of those guys, and I said, "Gosh, you guys, are we literally precision praise? I'm struggling a little bit. Are we just telling leaders to be nicer? Like,
Mm.
are we just saying, hey, be nicer to each other? Is that like the big idea of this?" And Stan said something that just put me on my heels, man. He just said, if more leaders understood precision praising, fewer of their staff would quit.
Wow.
And man, I just kind of lean back, right? And I'm just like, I could dedicate life to that. If I could help that that type A leader, right? Like, I've got a little type A in me. And I know that I don't normally, I have to be intentional to slow down and to praise people. Um, and if I could wrap my mind around that concept and lean in and help people to feel cared for and seen and loved and motivated, that itself, that's worth the entire book, right? I mean, like, I look at each of these competencies and say something similar, but for precision praising, man, let that ring. If more leaders understood precision praising, fewer of their staff would quit. And to me, we've created this the church today has created this revolving door of leaders. And in fact, I've said it in the past, we have some leaders, we're driving so hard and we're pushing so much that we have this wake of dead bodies behind us,
Wow.
of people that we have just run over trying to get to this great goal. But this goal mattered more than the people that we left behind. And if we understood and we saw them and we slowed down just enough to help them, everyone says, in some of those same studies that you mentioned, like, engagement, Gallup talks a lot about engagement. Engagement is lower than it has been in quite a while. And if we as the leader could engage with our people by knowing them and praising them and helping them to see, who they really are. And man, that actually, by slowing down, you'll go faster, right? Like,
Yeah.
right now we're just trudging forward and get on or get out, right? Like, but if we do this well, we'll be able to really craft this amazing experience for our staff. And part of it, man, is that few of our team would leave. The best and the brightest will actually stay on our teams because of the environment. The language I've put around it is
Yeah.
we want to create an environment that our best and our brightest couldn't imagine leaving. And I think that's what really matters here.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, real quick, we got to get to this one, lobbing forward. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're coming out of quarantine. We're coming out of everything changing. Everyone's job descriptions changing. I feel like we're still definitely in the midst of it, where everyone's kind of figuring out today,
Yep.
what's in today. So lobbing forward, give us just kind of a high level view of that and a little bit of what's in the book there.
Yeah, for lobbing forward, really, this is, a lot of times in the coaching world, it's like ask questions and don't give too much advice, is a big piece of coaching. And I have a love-hate relationship with that idea. I think that it's important that we lean towards self-discovery, but every once in a while, I want to do what Will Mancini calls explode dynamite. And kind of blow someone's mind. And so, lobbing forward, the definition we have is creatively challenging your team to look beyond the day-to-day grind of their jobs and into the future. Here's the reality. Most people on your team are so inundated with the to-do list. Their head is down, they're on their computers, they're just trying to get a few things done by the end of the day and check it off the list, that they have forgotten how to dream. I mean, like, again, let it sink for a second. I would actually say some of you who are listening, some of you who actually lead teams, you are so driven by the next event, by the next sermon, by the whatever is next, that you have become comfortable with the day-to-day. We have become comfortable with what is, and you have forgotten what it means to dream about what could be. And for me, man, like that is a shame. like we have got to. And so again, I look at my job as a coach, and thus your job as a supervisor, a boss, and it's because that makes you a coach. I look at our job is to inspire our people, to make them actually uncomfortable with the day-to-day of the status quo, and to push them forward. And so there's a quote that says, "A man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions." What? Like, it's our job to stretch someone's mind so they actually become dissatisfied with what has been happening, and they can't wait to move forward.
Wow.
And here's where I think we get in trouble, is that a lot of times, as leaders, we're afraid to do that. What if I inspire someone on my team, and that inspiration leads them toward maybe not wanting to be on the team, having a bigger dream than that? What if I inspire someone and their dream doesn't match up with my dream? I mean, man, they're real fears, and I understand it. But again, that is a
But what if that
sickness.
person stays on your team and never dreams and never?
Right. I mean, and having that first mentality that I described is part of the sickness, I believe, of believing that they are just a cog in your machine, that they are a means to an end. And so I can't inspire them. I can't praise them and make them realize how good they actually are, because then they might want to leave and try something else. And the reality is, like what would happen if we thought it's our job so much to inspire, and we have new people coming our way anyway because we've gotten so good at understanding their stories and praising them well, and using metaphor and all of the things that we talk about in the book, that I'm not afraid of you having an aha or a light bulb moment. I actually celebrate that in such a way that I would be dissatisfied if you stayed where you are. If you stayed doing exactly what you're doing right now, I would be dissatisfied by that. Stan is one of the best at this. He did this with me a few years ago. I was leading the student ministry division, and things were really going well. I mean, again, I just brought you on a little bit, and we were blowing out our goals, and all these things were happening, and I mean, all these churches were getting new youth leaders, and I mean, it was amazing to be a part of this really, really fun season. And at the peak of that, where most leaders would have said, "Just keep David happy, and let's make sure that he keeps doing what he's doing," Stan pulled me aside and he said, "David, in the next 2 to 3 years, you're gonna be doing something different in our company."
Mm.
And it kind of freaked me out, man. Like, I was like, "Oh, am I doing something wrong? Like, what do you mean?" And I asked him, right? Because, we've got this kind of really close relationship. I said, "Well, help me. What do you mean by that?" And he said, "I don't know yet. I just know that if we keep you in the role you're in, you will become dissatisfied and you'll leave. And so we're going to make sure
Wow.
that we have something else for you." And 2 years later, I become the vice president of coaching, and I give that division that I loved and helped build from nothing, and I give it to our good friend Vance, and he's leading it so well, and it's going incredible. And man, I like that was a really scary moment for me, because I'd gotten really comfortable in what I was doing. I'd gotten
Yeah.
really good at it. And then I was being challenged to move into something that I didn't know if it would even be successful. I, in fact, had people tell me, "Oh, dude, don't give up that for coaching. We don't know what that's going to look like, and you're already doing so well at this."
Yeah.
But there was something about it. The moment Stan said that, I was dissatisfied. If I were still today the lead over, the next gen or the student ministry division, I would be dissatisfied. And Stan planted that seed and helped us
Yep.
to get to where we are now.
Yeah. One of the big things that people have said about the COVID season is that we were forced into innovation.
Yep.
And that is one of probably the biggest gifts to ministry marketplace, is the spirit of innovation, that it's like those that innovate the most win, right? Kind of a deal. And so I feel like this lobbing forward idea is a great way to keep that spirit of innovation. Like Stan said, hey, in 2 years, you won't be in this role, but we don't know what it is yet. So let's spend some time dreaming and thinking and innovating what that even looks like. And so I think that coming out of quarantine, coming out of COVID-19, coming out of this stuff, it'd be easy to just kind of say, okay, well, we've got these things figured out now.
Right.
Let's just maintain. But the spirit of lobbing forward is saying, no, there is something more. There is something great. And so
And you can
I love that idea.
You can lob forward on an individual. You can lob forward on your entire team. You can lob forward on your entire ministry.
Yep.
And so again, it really is this idea of inspiration. How will you inspire people to move forward? And so you talk about COVID, and what you're saying is incredibly important. I'll even lean into the conversations we're having about race right now. Like there are people that are either a part of your ministry or adjacent to your ministry or somewhere in the middle of it that have not been told, for whatever reasons, right? Because people, have their own conceived ideas, have not been told what they could accomplish, have not been given the opportunity to accomplish those things. And they're just waiting. They're waiting for someone to say, "I see this in you. I see what you could become.
Yeah.
I see what our ministry could be if we had more of you that was a part of it." And to me, man, this is our chance as leaders, right? Because the reality is so many of our churches are being led by a single, group of people. And there is an opportunity for us as leaders to intentionally, again, all this stuff is intentional. You will not accidentally lob forward on someone. To intentionally see something in someone and draw it out of them, call it out of them, that causes them to say, I have to be a part of this. I have to be a part of something bigger as we move forward. Again, I think it's our job as the leader. I think we have to be willing to do that and to put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. And I know for a fact that, Ryan, someone did that for you. And I know that someone did that for me. But I talk to people all the time that don't look like us that would say, but no one did that for me. I didn't see myself as being able to be a part of that ministry, or being able to be a part of the staff, or being able to be, anything in any other role than what I was currently in, because they didn't, no one told me. No one told me I could. And to me, man, I think that it's imperative that we take this season and we look at our ministries and we look at the way that we're trying to lead others, and we lob forward in such a way that inspires people to step into new places and help them to realize that they can. And not only that, and not that they can because they have to kick and scream to get there, but because we're paving the way to invite them into it in an amazing way. We're giving up some of those things so that they can lead. To me, that's imperative.
I love it. So Dave, last question here. I like to end with this question. What in your life currently, or maybe even in the past, are some things that you've done or some just practice that you have to help bring you renewal in your life?
Yeah. It changes, man. It really does. The one that I did for a long time, I stopped and I've come back to it. Is this, there's an app called the 5-Minute Journal. For me, I am not a person that naturally reflects. I drive, I push, I'm ready for the next, let's get going. And one of those, having the ability to sit down. Now, I'm not a journaler, right? I've written a few ebooks and, written this, but I wouldn't consider myself like a natural writer. But there's that app has been something for me. It asks a couple questions in the morning. It asks a couple questions in the evening. And it has helped me to really just stop for a minute and reflect on what has been, and sets me up for where I want to go, moving forward in the future. I've got this, I've got this kind of morning routine. I've got some things that I lean into. But that one, in the seasons that I really lean in, that one really seems to press the refresh button for me.
I love it. Well, hey, Dave, thanks for joining us today. Go get the book, Improv Leadership. You can get it. We'll have links to it in the show notes and below in the description. So take a look at it, Improv Leadership, How to Lead Well in Every Moment. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate it, man.